Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer Sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are excited to bring another guest to you whose life was lived, pretty much her childhood was lived during the 1950s. And she has noted to us that so much of her life was similar to what Jackie, yours and my lives were in the 1950s. And so that must mean she grew up on a farm, she had chores, she was involved in music, and we are excited to find out about that. So Jackie, why don't you tell us a little more about the book that really has started this whole 1950s Fun Chat program, but we can go from there.
All righty. Good day, good evening, wherever you are. To everyone, I'd like to have you peruse your screen, please, and note the purple banner running across the bottom of the screen that says www.whilethewindmillwatched.com. Now, that is our website where you can go to find things about the authors, information about the authors, the vendors where you can order the book, where you can purchase the book, the events, and the previous 1950s Fun Chat that we've had. And Janine, what number is this?
This is number 72.
How about that?
Working our way to whatever.
Whatever. Okay, and then up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see our beautiful book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And the cover features a beautiful North Dakota sunset that wraps around the book. And you'll also notice in the lower right-hand corner of the book a little white dot, and you maybe can't read what it says, but this is what it says. It is a National Independent Press Award in the regional nonfiction category for Distinguished Favorite. Now, our book was published in April of 21. In April of 22, this past year, this award was bestowed upon the book, and we are grateful.
Oh, and there's more to come in 2023, too.
Would you like to say that now or later?
Well, we'll bring it up. We'll bring it up in the future. Some people might be aware of it, but it's exciting.
Okay. In the meantime, we'd like to introduce you to our guest. Her name is Eileen Torgerson Lee, and she arrived on this earth in 1947. She has lived on a farm 7.5 miles southwest of Leonard, North Dakota, during her youth and most of her adult years. Her family has lived on a portion of the homesteaded land for 4 generations. Eileen attended grade and high school in Leonard, graduated from North Dakota State University with history, social studies, and music in secondary education. And she picked up a few other majors after graduation, so she is well educated. Eileen claims varied occupations. She taught at high school level for 25 years. She administered community development block grants. She gave piano and voice lessons. She was a bookkeeper, worked for her church doing financial and pastoral duties, managed property, helped in the farm, just to name a few of her work experiences. Eileen has been married to her husband, Stephen, for 55 years. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. They reside now in Fargo, North Dakota. Eileen, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hi, Eileen.
So many of our Fun Chat guests have mentioned work ethic as being a characteristic of rural kids of the 1950s. What were your responsibilities as a young person of that time?
Well, I think my work responsibility started at about the age of 2.
Oh,
Things
my.
like making my bed, feeding the cats and dog, and that type of thing. And when my 3rd birthday came around, I was given a Shetland pony for my birthday.
Oh, wow.
I asked if it was a quilt, meaning a colt.
Oh,
But
okay.
it was a full-grown horse that was just a little bit taller than a yellow Labrador dog.
Oh,
And at that time, I had to pump the water for the horse every day, and I had to curry it every day. It was the best curried horse I ever had.
Mhm. Eileen, tell us what currying means.
Okay, it's a type of a comb brush type of thing that you go over their hair with, and it takes out dirt and things and combs it. Looks,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you.
okay.
And so the chores were added to, picking eggs and whatever, and making sure that the cluck hens didn't peck your eyes,
Oh,
and all sorts of things going on. But when I turned 11, I really did have a lot of chores because my mother decided it was easier to go out in the field all the time than to cook and clean for hired men.
Ah.
And so I was in charge of the house, the garden, which was huge, and had to mow the farmstead, which was about 10 acres of mowing, and weeding and watering the garden and harvesting, and of course later in the season, canning and freezing. We had 2 huge freezers, and I had 500 to 1,000 jars that we filled all the time.
My
Eileen,
goodness.
did you do that? Did you do that all yourself as an
Do you have
11?
Yes,
siblings?
when I turned 11 that spring, right. Mhm. But
Wow.
when you've had lots of chores for many years, you know how to do things. So
Oh, yes, you
it
do.
really wasn't
So,
that bad. I had
Eileen,
to
did you?
have,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I had to have dinner on the table at 12. That was dinner time at the farm,
Yes.
every day. But once in a while, if my mother quit early, she would make supper, which was the evening meal.
Mhm.
And she always made breakfast, so I didn't have to make breakfast. She did that.
Did she give you any meal plan ideas, or that was all up to you as well?
That was up to me, and I just laugh now because I'm sure we had lots of days with like fried hamburgers and potatoes and a boiled vegetable and a lettuce salad.
Yeah.
But after I was more used to it, we did, I would make roasts and chickens and turkeys and everything. But at the beginning, I think there were a lot of hamburgers.
So,
That's kind of what we have around here is hamburgers. My husband loves fried potatoes, and I think that comes from having had them so often in his childhood.
I have
Hey,
a question, though. I have a question for you. Do you have any siblings so they can help with the work?
I have one sister who's 4.5 years older. And I was thinking, I think that's the summer that she worked for someone else that summer. So she was gone.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Was she?
How did you feel about that responsibility? Excuse me, Janine.
Yep, that's
I didn't mind it, except, I used to like to go places more. And I used to like to go and ride horseback more than I had time for and things like that. But actually, I got pretty good, and nobody got in my way because I was the only one there. So I could get things done quite rapidly.
Tell me about that mowing. Was that all with a small push mower, or was it a self-propelled mower, or how did that work for you?
The house yard I had to do with a push mower just because it looked better.
Oh,
And we had it was a very dangerous sickle mower for the barnyard. The front was a sickle, and you pushed it. I don't know if you've seen those or not, but they were very dangerous if anybody got in the way or anything. I remember hollering at the dog to get away all the time so I didn't mow off the beach.
Yeah.
That was used in most of the out yard or barnyard, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Okay. And your pony. If from reading the book that we had a Shetland pony, and those little stinkers had minds of their own. What was your little pony like?
She was really good. If I did ride her away from home and she got tired of it, she would make sure that we got back home. But most of the time she was very cooperative. And I named her Traeger, which any 50 persons knows was Roy Rogers' horse's name.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would jump on over the butt, to get on Traeger, and she would just stand there and very patient. But like I said, she would get a little perturbed if we went too many miles away from home, and she would insist on coming home.
And they usually came home faster, at a faster pace than when they went away from home too.
At a full gallop.
Oh yes.
Exactly.
Did you ride with the saddle, or was it always bareback?
I had a saddle. I usually put it on if we had company that was going to ride her, because normally I just got on bareback. And then when I was older, of course, I got bigger horses because she wasn't big enough to be ridden by anyone too old,
Yeah.
But we had Houdini next, was a half pony of America and half quarter horse.
Houdini.
And Houdini could get out of anything. We just gave up putting him in a fence or in anything. He could open latches. He could do anything.
Wow.
But he didn't go any place. He just, went out in the yard.
Yeah. Well, you certainly had the opportunity to learn work ethic, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Oh, my goodness. So you've indicated that you loved having a childhood in the 1950s, in spite of or despite or whatever, all of your hard work. So what comes to mind when you hear the words the 1950s holiday traditions?
I think the first thing I think of is the tinsel covered trees that were so prominent in the 50s, real trees, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We always had bubble lights and gorgeous glass ornaments on them.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that. All the pageants, programs, lots of music for the holidays, all the holidays. We had church was always a big part of every holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have family over, great big meals and things. And we'd also have friends and neighbors, especially neighbors who didn't really have family close or something, bachelors and whatever. So we at Thanksgiving, we had 16 turkey plates with a great big turkey in the middle of the plate.
Whoa.
And we always used all of those, plus maybe another set, because there'd be a few more people who would come by.
Yeah.
And very traditional, the turkey and dressing, sometimes with lutefisk and lefse on the side, as well as all the normal side dishes.
Was that a home raised turkey, Eileen?
No, my mother raised turkeys for many years before we were born. They were married, I think, 17 years before they had any kids. And I swear everything that she ever bought was from her turkey money, or at least it sounded that way.
Turkey money.
But she was kind of tired of turkeys, and we didn't have turkeys. I had pet chickens galore, Japanese banties and regular banties, all sorts of pet chickens. And I had ducks. An aunt gave me 2 eggs that were ready to hatch when I was 4. And the ducks hatched and really did think I was their mother. That's kind of the thing they say. And the last one died when I was in college.
Oh, my.
Oh.
They slept with the dog and the cats, and
I would think that duck was maybe somewhat anxious when you were gone at school.
They were. There was a pair, but a carpenter killed one. They were like watchdogs, quack, quack.
Yes.
The carpenter threw a board at one and killed it.
Oh.
Well, and the other duck it was mourning for a long time. But it would just stay by me, and every second it could, And so when I went away to college, it was not a happy duck.
Oh.
Yeah.
Happy ducky.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But the holidays were always fun, always lots of people, lots of food, lots of music, lots of programs for every holiday in church and school, and even at home we did things. And sometimes we'd have like group canasta playing, the card game. I started playing at 4, and my grandma and grandpa were playing the same game. We'd just have all ages, and if you got too many people, they'd add another deck of cards. So they were very good experiences.
Did you celebrate the 4th of July and Memorial Day also?
Yes, Memorial Day. Well, from the time I was about 10 until I was probably 40, we went around to the cemetery singing, and we went to 7 and 9 cemeteries, depending upon the schedule. So it took most of the day. And so that was, I guess, the celebration. The
Yeah.
4th of July, my uncle, who owned a drugstore, he was a pharmacist, would come from out west and bring all his leftover fireworks along. And my father would have bought fireworks too. So we had a huge display of fireworks every 4th of July. And then we'd usually roast wieners over a fire made out at the edge of the farmstead, under a big tree kind of, and had picnic tables out there and things. And we'd have a celebration right at home. Which makes me think of another thing. For many years, especially my father's sisters and brothers, but some of my mother's too, would spend their 2 weeks of summer vacation at our house. Now, I thought it was great. They all had kids similar to my age. I didn't have to work as hard. I got to play more. We'd ride, play games, I'm thinking of my mother, though.
Yeah.
And it was right in the middle of harvest. Many of them chose to come. And so hectic, busy.
Did they help with the cooking?
Yes.
Good.
She'd have us help some too, but she did let us play more than when there were other kids around.
Yes.
But in all the beds and sheets, you know how it is with house guests for 2 weeks at a time and whole big families. We had a huge house, but it was still a lot of work. To us kids, it was a lot of fun.
Did they choose to come at harvest because they wanted to be a part of that, or they wanted to see it, or that was just what time was convenient for them?
I think they went before school started.
Sure.
The old harvest, for wheat and a lot of the crops we grew was like mid-August to into September kind of, and they came right before school because school usually started after Labor Day.
Eileen, tell us if you what you know of the homestead, of which you still own part of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually we own about half of it, I guess. It was the surveyor had gone through, and he had kept, I believe it was a section that he liked for himself. And then my grandfather, who would have been Theodore Torgerson, and then Torgerson. Shortened it all the time. Came and homesteaded right next to it, and he bought that section that the surveyor had. And that was the start of it. And then they bought what we call Coburn. There used to be a Coburn elevator, and we live in Coburn Township. My son has a trucking company, Coburn Trucking. Coburn is the township. Anyway, very shortly after that too. And so we still have it. My father bought it many years ago before I was born. And they lived there for many, many years. And then my husband and I lived there for the majority of the time we've been married. And my son bought the home quarter. We still have the rest of it now, but he bought the home quarter and the farm, and he runs a trucking company, but he also has some cattle, and he does a little farming. And it's kind of in your blood, if you're a farmer, you're always a farmer.
Yep. Yes. Like, I know what you mean. Interestingly, one of our previous guests talked about his relatives, his ancestors, there we go, who homesteaded in North Dakota, also was able to have a tree claim. Do you know if there was a tree claim with your farm?
Yes, it was a tree claim. And the tree claim was there until I don't know if anything is left of it now. Actually, my son sold just a little corner off where the remaining tree claim was to my nephew who wanted to build there in the corner. And he's in the process of building now, and I have not been out to see if they managed to salvage a couple of the old trees. They are old.
When this gentleman told us about that, I wondered, well, where did those trees come from? Because North Dakota certainly didn't have any. They must have come from Minnesota.
Well, you had to plant so many, and I don't know. I think I don't know if it's a soil conservation district or the precursor of that, whatever. I believe got the trees and you purchased them and then planted them. And that was part of the requirement, you know. We had shelter belts galore too. My father was very into shelter belts way before most people were. So as a child, I watered a lot of shelter belts.
Yes.
Okay.
I think you and Jackie can identify with that, with that raising of those trees and shelter belts, and the need that there was, especially in that era, for hoping to control soil erosion and the wind from whipping through and taking the North Dakota topsoil with it.
Right?
Yes. So you're very musical. And how did your musical experiences and exposures to different kinds of music in the 1950s influence your adult life? And may have come from family or church or your community or what?
Well, we had junior choir at church, which you started very young, and we always were singing solos, duets, trios, whatever there. And in school, we had a lot of music and a lot of performances. We performed almost every month at PTA, and we did it with others, and we did sometimes for 4-H, you know, which was of course a big part. I took lessons for clarinet and tenor saxophone and French horn and percussion and of course piano. And when I was older, I went to the Conservatory of Music, which was upstairs in Bose Music in Fargo.
Yeah.
Upstairs level. But we also had a lot of music in our own house. If he wasn't too busy, Dad would bring out his violin or his banjo, or sometimes he'd play the saw. You know, you take a on a saw, and it was beautiful. Mother would join in on the piano. And when we were younger, my sister and I would dance and sing to the music. When we were older, we would pick up an instrument too. You know?
Sure. Do you remember any special song that they would play?
Well, my dad liked "I Love to Call You Sweetheart," so he used to sing with that.
Yes.
But we did all kinds of music. And if you remember those old school songbooks, those America Sings and whatever.
Right. That's what we use.
Those were very common. And of course, at the church, we had the Sunday school books that we sang out of a lot. They were a little peppier than the hymnals. But
yes.
And of course, sheet music as we got a little older. But
right.
You know, it's always music. And we had record players, you know, the 33, 45s, you know. Right.
78.
I still have Gene Autry's original of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Really? That's awesome. Eileen, did you ever get involved with in interest in rock and roll then?
Oh, yes. My older sister, you know, had the rock and roll records.
Sure.
And so I learned all the dances before I could ever go to the rock and roll dances.
Yeah. Cool. Were there dances in your community?
We had dances all over the little towns around there. Lots of times we'd go to 2-3 dances a week when I was like a teenager.
Wow.
Danced all night. Loved it.
Yeah. Yes. You certainly have had a very full life in a variety of areas.
It's been busy.
You know what's so interesting too, Jackie, is I think back to many of the guests who we've had on the Fun Chat who came from North Dakota. Music was so vital in the home, and it was not just the kids. It was the mom and the dad, and maybe the generations ahead of that. That was the entertainment that occurred in the home, and wasn't that wonderful? And then how it passed from generation to generation. Some pretty talented musicians have come out of North Dakota, and who knows? It could have started back then in prior to the 50s.
And we actually got TV when I was 4 because my dad was into electronics. He was an engineer.
Yeah, early.
Put up a 90-foot tower, and so
Oh,
got wonderful music performances on television from. We'd get Texas and New York stations.
oh my
Really?
word.
Not just
Before they
Fargo and
started
Valley
early.
City.
Yeah, they didn't start the ones around here till I was older. But
Oh, is
Was,
that right?
was it just your family who was able to have access to that tower?
yes, only boy did we have company. Which was fun. I thought it was fun. Because all the neighbors would come over to see this television, in black and white, of course.
Yes.
Sure.
Test patterns early in the day. And
Well, what did your West Coast relatives think about your access to TV?
well, I tell you, most of our relatives weren't way out on the West Coast, but we had some in Montana and, out toward the West more. My husband's relatives are out on the West Coast, but I think that they enjoyed that when they came to visit as well, because not all of them did have television at that point.
Mhm.
And I remember our living room being packed at Queen Elizabeth's coronation.
Oh, sure.
And I loved that. Pretty dresses, horses, and fancy carriages. I was in my element. I guess I was 5. I always thought I was 4 then, but I think I must have been 5.
Yeah. Even black and white, you could see the sparkles of her jewels.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. It was
Well, that kingdom, you might say, has had a lot of draw for many Americans through the generations. With anything special that happens, it seems as though we're right there to watch it or to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to do anything differently, especially thinking back in the 50s, or maybe it would spill over into now, is there anything you might have changed or wish you would have done or something
I
like that?
think like anyone, there's many things that if one could, you would change. Small things mainly. When I first went to SU, I registered in engineering. They called me and said, "You can't be in engineering." I said, "Why?" I mean, I had the prerequisites, the grades were fine, whatever. You're a girl.
Yeah.
No kidding.
No kidding. But before I was done, they were allowing girls to enter. But then, with all the sequence courses, I would have to go back and, take so many different things. So maybe a change in career path. Also, I maybe wouldn't have done such hard physical work like hay bales and things because it all comes back to haunt you at this age.
That's right. Lower back.
Yes, I probably sleep a little more than I did. I did a lot of things, except I never had much time to sleep. And I would do that, I think. Also, the night I passed the candle at the house, besides everybody saying, "Who are you engaged to?" I never believed in going steady, I had drawn after dinner a topic to extemporaneously speak upon. If you remember, we did that for a little while at the house. And so my topic was, what is the best age for you to get married and why? I came up with 23 to 25, and I had tons of good reasons. That night I passed the candle, and of course I was married at 19. I maybe would have listened to myself a little more.
Well, love just did that, huh? And you had gone with him, like you say, we didn't know who this guy was.
Off and on since I was 11, because I skipped a grade, so I was in 7th grade. It wasn't as young as it sounds. I was in junior high. And we'd gone together off and on, and I think we went together almost all the time in my junior year of high school.
Okay.
But he's 4 years older, and he went to Oak Grove, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't like I didn't know him.
Did he go to NDSU then? Also?
No, he had been in the service at that time over in Vietnam, and then came back. So that was like, but I had known him. We still don't agree on the first time we met, but we met in Leonard. We met at actually a Luther League event. He says at roller skating, which was a 50s thing. We skated constantly. Leonard and skated on the cement.
Eileen, did you go to drive-in movies?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Wonderful.
Do you
Where-
remember?
Yeah, where were they? Where were the drive-in
Well,
movies?
we went to Fargo some, and then I think it was Winemere or by there that had one that we went to a lot. And yes, but they were nice. And lots of times a whole car full. You know, I always hear about how romantic they were. Well, lots of times we had a whole car full of kids, you know.
Well, it was less expensive to get in that way too.
Exactly.
Yes, and do you remember anything about the cars at that time?
Well, lots of cars that we had, but I remember the great big seats, and you know there was never a console or anything, you know, and they were so comfortable compared to a lot of the cars now. I thought.
Remember with two-door cars when the back seat had to come forward, how it always came forward kind of at an angle to allow the people to get into the back seat. It was yes, and the of course crank windows. Did your dad enjoy driving around the community with his arm out the window? That's a lot of farmers who did that.
You know, we got to go look at the crops.
Exactly.
A Sunday evening or afternoon or something. And I used to think it was kind of fun just to drive around. And then they say, well, maybe we should see how the neighbors' crops are doing. So then I'd go a little further.
Yes. Well, that's the way a farmer measures how well he's doing as a farmer, I think. You know, one thing that I remember our family doing at the end of the 50s, maybe even beginning of the 60s then, was going to the Bismarck airport and watching airplanes land and take off. That was a huge voila for us.
We had field trips from school to go watch that.
Oh, really? And were these commercial airliners or?
Well, we'd go to Hector Airport.
Yeah.
And there were some commercial and some small planes at the time, and usually we'd incorporate it with some other stops as well. But a lot of field trips went to the airport.
We wanted to ask you about the community development block grants. What did those involve?
Well, the first one I did was I remember raising my hand saying, dummy section over here, retarded section. I have some questions. Nobody was asking any questions, and they were telling us how to do it. Well, then I found out they were all accountants who had been doing it. That was their job.
Oh my goodness!
So who was it? What was this? What was the scene? Where were you sitting?
Well, the first one I did was right in Leonard, and what happened is they asked me to go and testify to get funds. Well, I got a lot more funds than I'd asked for even, and so they said, "Well, then why don't you administer them?" And who gave? I went to the training session, which I really felt like, usually if I have a question, somebody else does too, and I didn't realize that everybody else was a professional. So then after I had to learn all this stuff, then people would ask me to do it. And then it was no problem after I'd once gone through everything and figured it all out.
So how did you start out? Who were those? Who were your people? And what in your company?
We got permission to redo 11 homes within Leonard.
Oh my!
Yes.
And the money came from whom?
It's a community development block grant from the government, and they give you the block sum of money, and you have to decipher how to administer it.
I see.
And it worked out well. I approved 11 different rebuilds, some with new basements, foundations, and a lot with bathrooms. Some people didn't have bathrooms even. And this was not that many years ago, roofing, all sorts of things. It varied, but we used up just about every penny and didn't go over, so it worked out well. A friend, or actually it's my cousin, had volunteered to supervise the crews some, so we worked together because I was working full time, and I couldn't, get out on the cruise and make sure they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. So he did that. And he was much better. I think he told them exactly what he expected, where I would have been a little bit more subdued, I think.
Well, that certainly helped to bring draw more people into Leonard because of that, or kept people there because of the financial help?
Well, and helped them is the way I looked at it. It helped them a lot because some of them maybe could have afforded, there were income guidelines, but some had good enough incomes they could have done it. Others couldn't have,
So that definitely raised first of all, raised the facade in that things looked nicer,
right?
And that invited people to come. So is this this program still in?
As far as I know, it's still functioning. Yes.
Isn't that wonderful? Oh,
I really like it. It is involved, though. There's all the environmental impacts and all the. My audits were kind of fun. I mean, I kept good records and I kept in the way I'd read to do them. But when the auditors would come, they'd ask for something, and I'd say, "Do you mean this?" And I'd have them a book, I didn't need the terminology, for that. I had it all there. So.
Okay. Wow.
It's got easier each time. How's that?
Sure. Eileen, we're getting to the end of our broadcast, and I'd like to ask each guest these same questions. One is, what is a very fun memory that you remember from the 1950s?
When we were talking now, I was thinking of roller skating. We skated every Wednesday and every Saturday night. Kids came from all the towns around. You did meet a lot. That's where my husband thought he met me. Apparently, first time didn't impress him. But it was good music. It was a fun time to be together. I remember everybody getting along so well. I don't have memories of people disagreeing hardly ever in the 50s. In my life, everyone was very cordial and very nice, and we all had similar values and so forth, so that it went together well. But we all looked forward to that roller skating so much, and that was our real social time, because as you know, if you're busy on a farm, we're envious of those town kids that got to go play all the time, right?
Yes.
And so that was probably one of the fun memories.
Okay. Can you still roller skate?
Do I still?
Yeah.
I did the last time before I got my knees and hips replaced. I haven't quite dared to do it with my replacement part.
Fun. And Eileen, from the 1950s, which was such an influential time in people's lives, what stayed with you and carried through to your adulthood?
I think the thing that probably carried through the most is, my parents, but also every other adult I was around, kept saying, "You're no better and you're no worse than anyone else. Treat everyone the same. They're all important people." And I think that comes from the 50s values.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Viewers, I would recommend these ladies' book to anyone who's lived through the 50s or wants to know about the 50s. It's a great book.
Thank you, Eileen. I'm sure you could write one just with the same thoughts.
Yes.
Viewers, we're so glad that you joined us today to hear the story of 1950s by our guest, Eileen Torgerson Lee. There we go. I got to get these last names right. It's been fun for her to take us back to that time when it was a fun time and it was a safe time. And as Eileen mentioned, people thought of everyone equally. It wasn't. It was just a really neat time. And if you were a child of the 50s, you probably had those same thoughts too. So Jackie, until next time, how can you lead us to the end of our program?
Well, it's another business thing, and that is, you see the little red button, the subscribe button. Please click that. Also, the blue thumbs up button. And one more thing, invite your family, your friends, everyone you see to join us at the 1950s Fun Chat and to check out that website, www.wildthewindmillwatch.com. Until next time.